Over the past few days, I've been working on a Shattering Concoction build, and at this point I'm level 90 on my second Pathfinder playing this build exclusively. I've had a few people ask about this build, and while normally I would make a build guide for it, I think it's important to wait a bit before doing so. GGG is just getting back from their offices from the holidays, and I'm expecting a lot of changes in the next couple of weeks. I think it's very likely concoctions in general, or at least poisonous concoction, will see some sort of nerfs, in order to avoid potentially releasing a guide that gets changed significantly directly after I've released it. I've decided to wait until we see what these changes may be. The last thing I want is for people wasting time leveling a character or respecing one just for the build to get changed completely. I hope that this makes sense, and I hope that you can understand my position. As for the potential nerfs to concoctions and poisonous concoction, here's some of the ideas that I've had in that regard. Currently, there's some clear bugs that shouldn't be affecting concoctions. Increased damage with bow skills shouldn't be something that is scaling damage of an unarmed skill. This is a large damage increase for all concoction skills that should not work. I hope that this is fixed prior to addressing the overall power level of these skills. I would hate for an overarching nerf, then a bug fix afterward, leading to the skill being significantly worse off once the bug is fixed. We're at a weird crossroad for concoction skills. The idea of having ascendancy only skills is scary. GGG put themselves in a spot where if a skill is strong, it's going to be the single best way to play an ascendancy. And if it's not strong, then it's just a completely dead ascendancy node. I see no reason for these skills to be Pathfinder only, and making them Pathfinder only adds a layer of complexity for no reason. Then we get to the last problem, which is gem scaling and Widowhail. With the existence of Widowhail and how well concoction skills scale with levels, it's really the only option for making a concoction build. Sure, there might be some choices out there that are remotely competitive on lower budgets. However, the higher budget, the less and less competition there will be with the amount of quiver scaling that exists. So what does this mean? Do you nerf Widowhail? What do you do with the ones that already exist? Are we going to really have legacy items 1 month into a game after being released? Are they just going to delete them even though people spend a ton of currency on them? It's a very complex problem that doesn't have an easy solution, and I'm not sure what the right answer is. But for any projectile skill in the game currently that has some form of flat damage scaling with levels, there's really no better option than Widowhail right now. Maybe the best option is to remove increased bonus gain from quivers on jewels, so the top end of these builds isn't as high, but since it's standard right now, those items will still exist no matter what after the changes. If it was up to me, I'd probably start by fixing the obvious bugs with this skill, and then from that point, I'd probably reduce the overall damage of all concoction skills by like 15 to 20%. At one point when making my original Poisonous Concoction build, I had around 7,000 DPS on Poisonous Concoction before the buffs. And at that point, I was still able to do all of the content in the game. I probably have close to like 500,000 poison DPS, somewhere around there. With that much poison DPS, it was more than enough to kill any content. Fast forward that to getting my damage tripled when the patch came out, it's pretty clear that at that point concoctions were pretty broken, and I do think that they do need some sort of nerf. Like I said, I think losing 20% on these skills still puts them in a spot where they are very strong, but lowers their ceiling to a point where you actually still have to do some mechanics in boss fights, which I think is important in the early health of the game. When Cyrus came out for the first time, sure there were some builds that were capable of like one-shotting him, but the idea that you had a build that was like 5 divines of overall budget, or 5 exalts back then, and was able to basically skip all of the interesting mechanics of a fight right as a boss came out, I think something like that just isn't good for the health of the game. The next few weeks should be super interesting when it comes to the future and direction of PoE2. I have faith that GGG will make the right decision for the future of the game, but only time will tell. As for the Shattering Concoction build, if there isn't any changes announced in the next week or so, then I will most likely make some type of guide for this skill, maybe just not as in depth. And even if Poisonous Concoction does get nerfed, it won't be the end of the world. That build is incredibly strong, and hopefully the nerfs will just lead to more options when trying to make it viable again. Thanks for watching.
You are too late. The fourth edict already burns for your world. Insignificance. This is the legacy of humanity. The Mother Soul must...
Don't mind if I do.